afternoon, and I just want to thank you all for coming to Grand Rounds. Coincidentally, I don't have to, Renee did not have to give me a little bio today to introduce the speaker, because as my slide indicates, I guess we couldn't find anybody else, and the speaker today is me. And it's really a great privilege. By the way, there's seats in the middle and in the front for those looking for places to sit down. You know, I think as we want to do is to provide regular updates of how we're doing, what do we want to be doing in our cancer enterprise. And by the way, I use the phrase cancer enterprise because I think one thing that we're all very proud of at Yale Cancer Center and Smilow Cancer Hospital is the notion of oneness, something that the school and the hospital system is aspiring to do, and I think we do exceedingly well. That is bridging the missions for the benefit of our patients with cancer. I will give you the cliff notes of what I'm going to talk about is that we've had a great year and frankly a great decade, because as many of you know, this coming year, we will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the opening of Smilow Cancer Hospital. And as you'll hear from me today, I think that decade is a textbook in success of a cancer enterprise, an operation in clinical care and research. And so much of that, I think, is a credit to all of you in the room and those who are attending online and working in both the Cancer Center and the Cancer Hospital today. And what we've also learned, I think, as we celebrate this 10th anniversary, I think we also recognize the opportunities that lay before us in the coming decade. And how do we do that? Because we have had such extraordinary growth in both our clinical and research operation. Well, you know, you have growing pains, and also you have inflection points about how can we do it better and differently and actually expand the breadth and depth of what we do. So, I mean, that is certainly part of the discussion I want to touch upon today, and hopefully also have time at the end to field your questions. So when I arrived, we wanted to put together a vision statement for our cancer enterprise, and this is what we came up with. For those of you who may not recall, a world leader in cancer care, research, and education, Yale Cancer Center delivers the transformative scientific discoveries and cancer innovations of Smilow Cancer Hospital and Yale University to bring us closer to a world free of cancer, one patient at a time. And I think the goal of that statement is to recognize who we aspire to be, that we leverage the communities that all work with us across New Haven and the state and beyond, and that ultimately we bring to bear those talents for the individual patient. There's actually two versions of this, because we're not just, is this mic on? Yeah, we're not just Yale Cancer Center, we're Smilow Cancer Hospital. So I'm not going to bore you with both versions, but there's a version where you put Smilow Cancer Hospital here and Yale Cancer Center there, and I think it is reflective of the sort of the branding things we do from time to time, but it's essentially what we're all doing together. So our mission, I think, is straightforward, which is to provide expert, compassionate, state-of-the-art care, to conduct research across the breadth of investigation, to promote public health and particularly serve our high-risk and diverse underserved communities, to disseminate information. And I think that's something that we always want to be mindful. We are, I think, exceptional, and we want the world to know it. We want to know that our innovations are available to our broader colleagues globally. And then, no less importantly, we're here to train the next generation to, as we enter the World Series, build our farm system to ensure that both in clinical care, research, administration, that we continue to bring along people, new talent, to expand what we do. So I think just some observations that we probably all share about where we are today. As I mentioned, over the past decade, we have had unprecedented growth. With this building, you know, Smilow Cancer Hospital, a 15-story edifice, and I actually visited it when it was still steel girders in 2009, an empty building that is now filled beyond capacity. And so we have to think about what are our strategic opportunities going forward. And then given the fact that we have a very large population of individuals, patients, and families we now manage, how do we create additional opportunities? How do we look at our staffing models? How do we look at the workflow? I think these are the opportunities that are before us that we have to look at pretty intensively. We have, I think, a world-class network in cancer care. I don't think there is a comprehensive cancer center that has as successful a network as we have. I'll talk about it in more detail in a moment, but I think still we want to continue to innovate. How do we continue to expand the coordination between our campuses? How do we expand multidisciplinary care, not just on this campus, but each of our sites across the region? And how do we address the fact that we've gotten so good at this? I can tell you, our friends, both the North and the South, have started to say, hey, you know what? These guys have figured something out. Let's do it too. And emerging competition is an issue. I want to emphasize our competition is truly cancer, but we do have to realize that there is an effort to try to capture market share in the areas that we are successful. We, I think, have been at the forefront. Karen Adelson and a variety of people, Carrie Gross, have been keen to look at quality issues. And this is something that is on the front burner of our payers, of the regulators. We want to be in the lead in this space. We don't want to learn the rules. We want to make the rules. And so I think that's something we have to continue to expand over this next decade. We have had an over four-fold increase in enrollments in clinical trials since Smilow opened, which I think is an amazing statistic. But with that have been growing pains. And so we have to look at our staffing models. We have to look at how we do the work and make sure that we can continue to grow the number of trials we can offer to patients, and also to expand the complexity of those trials and make sure in the course of conducting that research, we don't miss the opportunities, which is to collect samples, then to understand as we do these studies, do we understand primary and acquired resistance so we figure out what the next hypothesis is. We, I think, have continued to expand our research footprint. As I'll show you, our NIH and total peer-reviewed funding has increased dramatically, but still opportunities. We want to continue to support innovation, investigation, team science. Look carefully, do we have sufficient infrastructure to support research, that we have critical core resources, and that each and every day we're thinking about how do we take the extraordinary science that we have at our center and leverage that to improvements in care delivery for our patients. We've had a lot of recruitments and expansions of our training programs, but I think we have to continuously look at how are we doing it? Are we doing it the best possible way in terms of recruitment, retention, training, mentoring, career development? And by the way, I'm not focused exclusively on faculty or scientists. I'm talking about nursing, administration, social work, literally everybody involved in our operation. We need to make sure that we have proper career mentoring, promotion, recruitment. We have to value everybody who is contributing to this mission. We also have to be mindful of diversity. I think this is something that is clearly critical for any industry and organization, and it's something we can't possibly overlook with our own enterprise. And then, as the economists refer to it, there are the macro issues, which is the costs of healthcare are growing dramatically compared to GDP, and that is certainly at the attention of regulators, government officials, as well as payers. And at some point, you know, I think we often wonder, will the bottom fall out in terms of supporting clinical care and research? We also know that in healthcare, and this is probably a good thing, consumerism, an informed patient and family is part and parcel. I think patients realize they have a lot of choices, and we have to make sure that we provide the best value and the best care we can for these patients. And then as well, there is an interest to reduce the amount of expenditures, both on the clinical care side and as well the concerns of federal government funding research. There is downward pressure. We know this. We have a champion in Congress whose office is right down the street, Rosa DeLauro, who last year pushed forward a over $2 billion increase in the NIH budget. But at some point, that ability to do that may start to diminish. And so we have to be mindful of how we expend our resources and how we innovate in fundraising. So I've been doing this for a while, some of you as well, and this is the model that I was familiar with, right? You know, there's the patient, there's research, there's somebody who provides their care, and that is sort of the very linear model of cancer care. But the fact is that model is antiquated, outdated, because this is really what cancer care is now. It's a very complex organization that requires lots of disciplines and lots of people on the research side and all sorts of infrastructure and technologies that we need to leverage, I think, to innovate in this space. So I think we need clearly to continuously bring into the community people of diverse talents and to recognize how we provide multidisciplinary care and team science to ultimately address the challenges of cancer. We've done a lot of recruitments, and I couldn't possibly refer to all of them, but I think some key leadership recruitments deserve mentioning. One individual that joined us a little over a year ago that's standing in the back there is Lori Pickens, who is our Senior Vice President and Executive Director. Lori brings to bear a wealth of experience, having led the Duke Cancer Institute, has now been here a year, and I think her expertise, her insights, her fresh look at what we're doing at Smilow and frankly at the Cancer Center has really been powerful, I think, as we advance the mission. Kim Slisser, who is now our VP for Patient Services and Head of Nursing, joined us about 8 weeks ago, Lori, is that right? She was unable to join us for this hour, but I think also from Duke and also somebody who really has been an effective leader in this space. And as we speak, looking at all of our clinical services, nursing operations to make sure that we're right-sizing it. We're looking at how we continue to expand that pool of talent. Stephanie Helene recently joined the leadership as the interim chief of hematology. And I think given her experience at Yale, her talent as a physician and physician scientist, I think is bringing to bear great things for hematology. We recruited Antonio Moro as our chief of neuro-oncology, who has really hit the ground running, had a phenomenal retreat, brain tumor retreat a few months ago, is looking to expand the footprint both in clinical research and even had time to figure out with Murat Genel how to draft a spore, which they're putting in the coming months. And then lastly, he's not here yet, but he'll be here in January, is our new Chief Medical Officer, Kevin Billingsley. Some of you may have met Kevin. He currently holds this job at the Knight Cancer Institute at Oregon Health. Really just a superb individual who has been a consensus builder, who appreciates building really effective clinical programs within academic health systems, a very successful leader in surgical oncology in his own right, and somebody I know we're all looking forward to working with. And I've had the privilege now of talking to Kevin pretty regularly about the direction we want to go, and I think he's got great ideas. One thing that Lori Pickens and I and Kevin and others have been thinking about is we really have, I think, an incredibly effective group that works in the office of the Chief Medical Officer, but as we get larger, as the breadth of what we do expands, we need to expand this. We obviously have leadership in the network, in quality, in ambulatory, but I think even in that space, we probably need to bring on additional leaders. You can see one already that I'll refer to in a moment, that is recruiting a Chief Patient Experience Caregiver Wellness Officer, but I think also both on the operations and network side, we want to bring additional deputies to expand the bandwidth as well. We're not just one discipline, we're lots of disciplines. Our cancer center includes a variety of surgical services, and I know I speak for Lori, all the chairs of surgery are keen to do this, is to bring on an associate chief medical officer who actually manages our surgical services. As well, radiation, a key component of what we do, and to have a similar role there. And as our inpatient system continues to grow, to think about leadership in that space. This is the abbreviated trend over the past decade. You probably all know, if you started when Smilow opened, it's really almost exponential growth. We continue to grow this clinical operation, 236,000 office visits. That rivals really any of the major matrix cancer centers across the US, and 85,000 infusion treatments in this past year. That's an extraordinary volume of patients being cared for, and it is truly a credit to the many caregivers that work across our network who obviously address the needs of those patients and families and are forever making it inviting for new individuals to get care in our facility. As I mentioned to you, I think beyond the great work we do here on the campus in New Haven has been, I think, an unprecedented model of care across community. One statistics that I've shared previously is in the United States, only about 12% of cancer patients are treated in tertiary academic sites. And I think cancer centers across the US have addressed that statistic differently. Some say, well, we're going to be really good at taking care of 12% of patients. Others say, well, we'll put our logo, our shingle on the front door of groups across the community that we'll affiliate with, but we won't necessarily take on the responsibility of making those fully integrated. And then I think it's what we've done over the past decade, which is to create these care centers across the state where each of the individuals working there are Yale faculty, employees of Smilow, and to be fully integrated. I think there's always additional work we want to do, but this is an extraordinary model, which, as you may know today, about 45% of every newly diagnosed cancer patient in the state of Connecticut is seen at some point within the Yale system. But there are changes, which are growing competition, aggressive hospital mergers and acquisitions, and a need to innovate in terms of how we do this. I think that includes leveraging our strengths. We have terrific disease expertise, and make sure that that disease expertise is present throughout the network sites. That we have to make sure that we don't just limit multidisciplinary care here. This is something Lori has really championed, to make sure that we cover all disciplines of cancer care in each of these sites, to really make them true destination centers, and to make sure that as much as possible, there is one standard of care wherever you go in the Smilow system. And then Neil Fishback, who recently took on the role of Assistant Director of our Clinical Trials Office for the network, is also anxious to further expand clinical research in terms of sample collection in each across the network sites. This is, I think, one amazing story. This is accruals in our network, which now represents 25% of all our clinical trial enrollments in the Smilow system. You're not going to see this at almost any other cancer center in the US. That is something that we're proud of. And I will tell you, when we had our 5-year site visit last year, this was something that really captured the attention of the NIH site visitors as a measure of the success of our center. What else we want to do? Well, we've gotten pretty good at this, and why not, beyond ensuring that we enhance the services we provide at each of these centers, is to expand our network. One thing that was clear when I arrived, there was actually, I think the hospital had hired a consultant to figure out where we should expand. And admittedly, you didn't need fancy math to figure out that being in Lower Fairfield County was a real opportunity, right? It is the most densely populated part of the state of Connecticut. It is probably one of the few areas of Connecticut that is having significant population growth. And it's been an opportunity for this cancer hospital to really be present in. So it's something that a number of us were committed to after my start. And as many of you know, I'm pleased to say that in July, Smilow in Greenwich became a reality. And I think that is something we're committed to providing a state-of-the-art facility for Lower Fairfield County, moving into Westchester County, New York, and to really have all of the bells and whistles that we think of in destination cancer care, including multidisciplinary care, clinical trials, outreach. And in fact, we're pleased to say that Norm Roth, the president of Greenwich Hospital, is committed to building a new building beyond the current cancer center present at Greenwich Hospital. To expand that, Lori Pickens is leading a group to program that building somewhere in the range of 55 to 70,000 square feet. Going to open, what, in 2023, Lori, thereabouts? 2023 to 24. We're aiming for, by the way, next year, if anybody knows any fast builders. But this, I think, is an opportunity to really be our second academic hub. Not to say that these other sites aren't major powerhouses in academic cancer care, but I think in some respects, we've been talking to Pat LaRusso about putting another phase 1 unit there. I know that given the demands we have in phase 1 here, that may seem daunting, but we have time to plan. And these are the kind of things we should put in this area that gives us not only a foothold in Lower Fairfield County, but an opportunity to expand into the densely populated parts of Westchester County, New York. In a few short weeks, we will be opening Smilow at Westerly, which will be paired with our footprint in Waterford and Lawrence Memorial. And so our entry into a new state for the first time, Rhode Island, and that facility will have the ribbon cutting in probably the latter part of this month. As well, we have been invited and likely to proceed with a center in Massachusetts with a facility that is anxious to get us on board. Probably they want us there yesterday, and we're just, Art LeMay and others, Ann Chang, are working through the details, but we anticipate that happening at some point in 2020. So, when you think about how you continue to build an exceptional clinical operation, for me, I like to sort of derive into sort of small boxes. And the way I see it, these are the small boxes of how you build an effective clinical operation, which is, first, make sure that you are the provider of choice for patients, families, and referring docs. There's a lot of work going on in terms of working on a reputation, making sure that we have continuing medical education events across the state, including, I think there's one I saw by email tonight or tomorrow in I think south of here, and we've had several actually just in the past month. But to continue to get the word out of what a great place this is and how much we welcome referring physicians, patients, and families, to make sure when they call that it's easy to get in here. And there is an effort I'll mention in a moment to further look at how patients, families, referring docs access our system, because we want to make it easy. And then lastly, when they come here, that they get state-of-the-art care and they want to stay here. And we owe that to our patients, do that regardless. And I think if we excel at each of these three boxes, we will do great things for patients in terms of clinical care and research. A lot of health systems have moved into the concept of service lines, right? That you have academic facilities have departments, but that ultimately care is provided through service lines. Within cancer, these are our service lines. This is the sort of front face of what patients and families, referring doctors look for. It is the way we deliver care, and frankly, it is these are the engines of our translation of our science into the clinic. And I want to applaud each of the leaders that we have, both in research and clinical care, in each of these service lines, because I think they're all doing an exceptional job, as well as the teams that behind them. One thing we want to do is to further empower these groups, to build strategic plans, to think beyond what they're doing in the next several months, and to enable them to really have a much bolder vision, both in research and clinical care. And so one thing that Lori and myself and a number of the chairs and our chiefs are thinking through is how do we further look at this infrastructure, which is, the leadership structure to make sure that we have a cohesive plan in each of the diseases to which there isn't siloed research and clinical, that they really are working together, that we really think boldly over the next 5-10 years, and also that there is administrative support for each of these units to help them beyond providing great research and clinical care to actually think strategically. So stay tuned. This is something we're working on in terms of how to staff it, how to model it. But I think Lori and others have a great plan in place to further enable the work that these disease programs are moving forward. There's a lot of work to expand our clinical operations. I'm really proud of the work that the group that has led cell therapy have accomplished. About a year ago, maybe more, we were committed to bringing CAR T therapy to our facility. We have a cell manipulation lab. We were doing TIL programs, cell therapy programs, but not CAR T. And in January, I think on January 20th or thereabout, we treated our first CAR T patient. We're now beyond 20. I think we only budgeted for about 20 to 25 in year one. And the program has gone extremely well. Almost half of the patients are actually enrolled in clinical trials beyond the FDA-approved approach. So we are now a player in this space. And I think having that capability will really allow us to expand our research in immuno-oncology. Palliative care, actually in the hour before this, I heard some great work that Jen Capo and others are doing. This is critical in terms of what we do in our care delivery. The evidence is abundant. You provide exceptional palliative care, you improve the quality of care for patients, you reduce hospital readmissions, you improve outcome, you do a lot of important things in terms of cancer care. And Jen, I think, has been committed to doing that, launching an inpatient palliative care unit, expanding both in and outpatient. This is something we want to continue to enable over the coming years. We understand that the emotional burden of cancer is great. And Lori and others were able to get approval on further funding for psychosocial oncology. There's been several aspects of this plan. One is a thorough review of how we can provide more social work care to our patients. How do we reduce the administrative burden of our social workers and increase the amount of time they're spending with patients? There's a number of our leaders in this who are leading that effort, as well as now an approved effort to recruit psychiatry, psychology, social work to further expand the breadth of services we have in this space. Survivorship, clearly important. There will be, 30 million cancer survivors in a decade. Is that right, Tara, thereabouts? And that's a function of our success. But we're going to have to figure out how to take care of a larger number of patients and how to work with internists and other groups to make sure that care plans are in place. And this is something that Tara and others are working on. Antonio launched the Brain Tumor Center, which I think will be an important amalgam of both clinical care and research. We know that there is a much greater interest now in genetics. We understand a lot more of the genetic precursors, risk factors for malignancies. The hospital is starting a program called Generations, which is actually doing a whole exome screening of basically about 20% of the individuals in the health system, of which if they have a cancer gene, they will be referred to our genetics program. So we have to be prepared for growing that volume. And I know that both Xavier and Aaron and others are working on that. And then we have a plan in place to have a proton center, likely to open in 2022, 3, thereabouts, somewhere in that vicinity. So stay tuned. But I think yet another great opportunity of what we're going to pursue within radiation oncology, therapeutic radiology, and then, as I mentioned, to really further expand the disease programs. This is the short list of what I could put on a slide, but there really is a lot going on with our cancer center. I mentioned to you that Karen and others have really led the charge in how we provide value-based care. About 10% of cancer facilities, I believe, participate in Medicare Medicaid's program of the oncology care model. We are one of them. And I think that was a bold move to join. because you might say, well, that puts you at risk, because if you don't perform to the satisfaction of Medicare and Medicaid, maybe you lose. But in fact, I think the leadership, the people in this space have done a great job opening the extended care clinic, looking at the way we provide care both in and outpatient. And these are the data that Karen and others are sharing, which is we've reduced admissions, we've reduced emergency department visits. And this is something that not only I think is important in terms of actually being one of the most successful participants in this program in terms of our ability to recoup costs, but also I think in improving the quality of care we deliver. So I think a lot of things that we want to, other programs we want to advance, as I mentioned to you, we want to look both on this campus and across our campuses of how we further expand multidisciplinary care. I think the value proposition we have to provide to patients is that each of the expertise that they need is represented and readily available wherever they are in our system. We recognize that the demands that are on our caregivers with regard to inpatient service is considerable. When I arrived, there were multiple iterations of how we were going to model the delivery of inpatient care among our faculty. And I think that includes our APPs and other services. And I think it's been a challenge. And so I'm really pleased that Roy Herbst and Ann Chang and Karen Adelson have led a group, sort of a multidisciplinary extended group to look at redesign of how we do this. There's a plan in place, and we're just now reviewing that plan to figure out how to implement it, because we really want to be at the forefront of innovating of how we provide exceptional care and at the same time are mindful of the demands on our caregivers. We have, as I mentioned to you, access is critical. We recently talked to another major cancer center where they looked at for each day it takes for a patient to wait to get to your facility for their new patient visit, your new patient volume drops by 1%. Because if they can't get into your facility, they're going to go somewhere else. Now, it's not like we want to, we're looking to grow the clinical volume exponentially. But on the other hand, I don't think a lot of us, I'm sure maybe all of us, have had the experience of having somebody we care about be diagnosed with cancer. Let me tell you, having gone through that personally, every moment you wait for an appointment is just an eternity. And we owe it to ourselves and to our patients to help get them in quickly. I think there's an opportunity to look at our operations. We've grown so quickly. How do we manage the workflow? Are we looking at, do we have the best staffing models, the way we move patients through our programs? And there's an effort afoot there. We also, I think, are looking at carefully, what is the model of how we better integrate across all our sites of care in an effort in that space? I mentioned expanding palliative care. And then, as I said earlier, this building, this 15-story edifice was empty, I guess in October of 2009, and it's now bursting at the seams. So we are going to have to think creatively how we use our space and where we're going to continue to expand the footprint. As some of you know, both multiple myeloma and benign hematology are actually moving out of Smilow to North Haven. And these are and it's a beautiful space that's opening on the 4th floor of that facility. That's actually an adjustment and a challenge for what we want to do, but we got to make sure that we do it in a way that preserves the success of the people who work there and as well our academic and research mission. And we're committed to doing that. So we're going to have to think innovatively about how we use the space and how we create new space. Patient experience is really part of the watchword of what you have to do. How do we make sure that third box, how do we make sure that that when patients come here, it is an exceptional experience? And that's something, as I mentioned to you, creating a new officer to lead this effort is important. It's something across the health system. And then another aspect of this is the well-being of the people who provide care. And when I say caregiver, I refer to everybody. Anybody who touches a patient, whether you clean the rooms, deliver the meals, provide infusion, we're all caregivers. And it is not easy to do that in cancer care. And this article, which got this opinion piece in the New York Times, got a lot of attention this summer. and I think it was a fair concern, which is all of us who are caregivers, well, we're in a unique industry because the bottom line is we can't say no. When somebody shows up at the front door and says, I need your help, I have cancer, the answer we can only provide is, I'm here to help you. But that obviously puts an enormous demand on all of us. And so as part of this Office of Patient Experience and Caregiver Wellbeing, we want to look at all this. The burnout rates across American medicine right now are about 49%, and cancer is certainly a unique challenge. How do we leverage technology? How do we look at the major demands that an electronic health record and workflow puts on our providers? And these are things that we have to be committed to now. So I think key to all this is transparency, engaging faculty and staff in all we're doing. We need everybody's help to work on these issues in our clinical program, because ultimately I think not only do we want to be the best place to receive care, but we want to be the best place to work in healthcare. And these are two aspects that we have to strive, which is why I emphasize the office not only of patient experience, but caregiver wellness. And as part of recognition of our staff, in this very place at 5 o'clock on Thursday, we will have our first Smilow Luminary Awards of Excellence. This is going to people who sort of work sort of on the ground in our facility, who are committed, who have really gone beyond the call in community service, leadership, operations, patient experience research. There will be 45 recipients on this round. This is an effort to be more inclusive, to really recognize larger populations of people who work here. So if you're free at 5 o'clock, come. We got finger food and a lot of fun to award certificates to people whose work we value. Turning now, no less importantly, to our research operation. The past 15 years, I think, has been a really exciting time in cancer research, in part because of our understanding of the genetic drivers of cancer and developing targeted therapies. A lot of great examples of this. I think this has transformed the landscape of lung cancer, and Roy Herbst, among others, has certainly led that charge. And then, of course, no less importantly, has been the revolution of immuno-oncology. The fact that for over a century, an effort to figure out how you leverage the immune system, it's now a reality. I mean, what we're seeing now with the checkpoint inhibitors, I think, was probably inconceivable for many of us just 2 decades ago. The question, though, is these things don't work for everybody. And we're obviously committed to figuring out how to deal with primary and acquired resistance to these approaches, but also what are the next opportunities? The short answer is, what's going to be the next revolution? I don't know about you, but I don't know. So what do? Well, we got to figure out how to position ourselves so that we're in the best place to find it, to discover it, and if it's discovered for others, how we leverage that finding to the benefit of our patients here at Yale. And so I think that includes making sure we have great people, that we have great clinical operations, research operations, infrastructure, and that we have the core resources that ultimately allow us to promote innovation across basic, translational, population, and clinical science. Because ultimately, in our cancer center, I think one of our great strengths is we are well positioned in each of the domains across the spectrum of cancer research, and we want to make sure that we translate that work into improved patient outcomes. I think the sort of workhorses of our research program in the Cancer Center have been our extremely successful research programs listed here and the leaders behind them. This group of 7 programs presented a year ago to about 22 NIH reviewers, and the end result was not only did we renew our grant last year, but we got an outstanding and we got an unprecedented 73% in funding for our Cancer Center grant. For those of you who are keeping score, the next highest on record that I could find was 38%. So that's a pretty unprecedented increase. But we don't stop here. And a number of the programs are thinking carefully about how do we continue to innovate in this space. And 2 programs in particular that have been focused on this have been signal transduction and virus and other infection-associated cancers. Recently, those 2 programs have changed their moniker as part of the emphasis. With regard to voice, now called cancer microbiology, is we know that beyond viruses, there are a variety of other biological processes that relate most commonly and most notably is the microbiome, bacteria, that we understand affect cancer risk, treatment, and outcome, and biology. And so I think with that expanded pool of talent, renaming the program. As well, beyond signal transduction, we realize there's a variety of other signaling pathways, cell-cell interactions, metabolism, that this program has begun to expand its footprint in, thus the name now Cancer Signaling Network. We have had tremendous and successful growth in our research funding. This is direct, not total, just direct, peer-reviewed funding for our Cancer Center this year, again, reaching a new high of 99 million. And I'm looking forward to breaking the 100 million mark. We'll make that announcement shortly, I hope, but an important precedent for a program that just a few years ago was at 58 million. As well, it doesn't go back to the opening of Smilow, because I will tell you, for those of you who are aware, the number here was about 250. So, we're in the we're bumping into the 900 range, but we're plateauing. I think that is reflective of the growing pains of a program that has grown almost fourfold in its enrollments. So, that's clearly an opportunity we have to think forth. But despite the fact that we have plateaued in our enrollments, the impact of our clinical research, I think, is really amazing. This is just the short list, what I could fit on a slide in the past 12 to 18 months. And each of these things, I would suggest to you, are practice changing, leading to new FDA approvals. And I think that is something that we really all have to recognize, because most cancer centers, if they get one of these in a cycle of 5 years of renewal, that's a success. I mean, just the last two, Barbara Burtness, leading to the approval of checkpoint inhibitors as part of the frontline therapy for head and neck. Dan Petrolak, leading an effort for a new antibody drug conjugate that almost certainly is going to approved for bladder cancer. And then I think at the plenary session at ASCO, a number of our investigators in cancer outcomes actually showing that the Affordable Care Act actually did improve outcomes for patients with cancer in the United States. These are practice-changing observations and something that we're particularly proud of. And we are just today continuing to advance Yale science into the clinic. Li-Ping Chen, who certainly has been credited appropriately for his success in discovering PD-1 and the checkpoint inhibition, has moved on now to targeting Siglid-15, started a company, NextCure. Pat LaRusso is leading that effort, which I think is likely to provide yet another generation of IO agents. Similarly, Craig Cruz, an innovator in chemical biology, having leveraged now the protein degradation system of E3 ligase, showing that you can now target these proteins, having launched a company with Arvinas, and their first entree with Dan Petrolak is targeting the androgen receptor in castrate-resistant prostate cancer. A unique approach, an orally available drug that's now in clinical trials here at our center. We realize that as we enter this next chapter of clinical investigation, the next decade, we brought on 2 new leaders just recently. Roy Decker, who has taken on the role of Associate Cancer Director for Clinical Science, and Joyce Toll, who I saw her standing in the back somewhere, now seated, who has taken on the role of Executive Director. And I really, I can't say enough about what this new team is doing in terms of really doing a thorough review of the CTO. And some of the things that we realize is that we have grown a lot, and we have to look at the way we do the work in terms of how we recruit, retain, mentor, educate the people, the now 150 plus people who work in the CTO, to look at our staffing models, to right-size them, to look at how we deal with regulatory, timely trial activation. We're doing great work, but we got to figure out how to make ourselves right-sized and appropriate to continue to grow. How we look at our portfolio, how we leverage genomic annotation, biospecimen collection, how we address the needs of the underserved, and how we continue to engage our networks. One thing a bunch of us have been working on related to our planning for 2020 is this list, which is the following things among others: accelerate, improve the time, reduce the time that it takes to activate studies, to expand, to right size us, to make sure we have insistence in pace so that we can break that ceiling we are at in terms of our clinical trial enrollment, to engage, in part to enable our physicians, our clinicians, to expand their ability to enroll patients into clinical trials, and also to address the needs of our CTO staff, and in part, look at the measure of staff turnover. So hopefully if we right size it, we create educational programs, retention programs, promotion programs, that turnover rate will be low. To innovate, Roy Herbst, Ed Kaftan, and others are looking to expand our ability to support investigator-initiated trials, moving Yale science into the clinic, and then lastly, to come up with a dashboard to which we monitor all this and continue to further expand it. We have brought on additional leaders into our more basic research operations: Carla Rothland, Katie Politi, Megan King, Joe Contessa, Amy Justice, Don Weng, and Mark Lemon now coming on as our new Associate Director for Basic Science. And I am thrilled to have each of these extremely talented individuals working through each of our programs, and I will tell you, they've all hit the ground running in terms of taking each of these programs, thinking thoughtfully about what the next decade and the next 5 years, as we plan for our next renewal, should look like. We obviously have great facilities to expand our depth of research. Mark Lemon and Yossi Schlesinger lead the Cancer Biology Institute. They continue to recruit to the West Campus, and we're really impressed with the productivity of the faculty in that space. And as well, we are continuing to recruit physician scientists to what will be a space at 300 George. That space on the 6th floor will be finished in January of 2021, but we're recruiting now. As a matter of fact, this week, we just recruited Jeff Ishizuka from Harvard, who is doing exceptional work in immuno-oncology as a physician scientist, and will be joining us in January. We want to continue to leverage the great talent of immunobiology, as well as our leadership in developing immunotherapies. This center was started a year ago, the Center of Immuno-Oncology. Roy Herbst was our interim lead director, did a great job of launching it. I'm pleased that Marcus Bosenberg has taken on the reins of being the interim director now, and a great transition. Among the things they did was a fabulous symposium last week that highlighted the great work here. As well, just in the past week, Marcus and Aaron Ring got a $3.8 million grant to advance translation in immuno-oncology. And just this week, additional great work, leadership of what we're doing in IO, namely Anna Marie Pyle and Kiko Iwasaki published this paper, I think on Monday, in which they actually are leveraging nucleic acid sensing, cytosolic nucleic acid sensing, in which an intratumoral injection led to a systemic profound immune response, which I think could leverage for a treatment approach for patients. As well, in today's issue of Nature Immunology, Sidi Chen, if you're following along, has published a really innovative approach using CRISPR gene editing as an approach for intratumoral vaccines, where in his animal models across malignancies, he gets a 50% complete response rate. Check out the pictures. It is an impressive study. Two efforts that I think really demonstrate the leadership we're doing in IO, and that will translate, I think, into the next generation of therapies. Roy Herbst, Ed Kaftan, and others through the Office of Translational Research have done great work to expand the footprint of translation. We're pleased to have renewed our skin spore this past year. Roy, I think, is well on track for renewing the lung spore. And the other thing that Roy has done is to expand the applications. Pat LaRusso looking at DNA damage. Barbara Burtness having submitted a spore in head and neck that I'm optimistic will be funded. Antonia Murad submitting a brain spore, and Melinda Irwin submitting a disparity spore this month. all of which to expand our footprint in translation. But we want to continue to do that. And I think there's a number of things we've known that we have to do in translation. Joanne Sweezy, as you may know, led an effort about 1.5 years ago to really engage the broader community of how we can have the infrastructure to expand translational research, to connect the basic to the clinical. And one thing that we've wanted to do is to have an umbrella consent. Lausch Pustai, Maureen Major Campos, and others have this month put into place a system of a universal consent so that today, every new patient who comes to Smilow Cancer Hospital is going to be consented so that their data, their clinical specimens, everything is available for research. So all of that is available for us in a fully consented, anonymized fashion. And I have a pretty consent, although I found out that although we printed hundreds of these, we're actually moving into the digital age, so most patients are actually signing online. But if you'd like a copy, I got about several hundred sitting in my office right now. It's quite nice. So that's, check that box. One thing we know is that we got to expand our molecular testing, our profiling. When I arrived, I think a very solid effort, but not, I think, what all of us would agree we're capable of doing. There's been a lot of discussions, and I think a person who has really championed this is Rich Licitano, one of the vice presidents here at the hospital. Rich has been dogged about making sure that we do this, and we now have an agreement among various parties that we, in the coming months, will launch a system in which every new patient will have their tumor undergo whole exome sequencing, that there will be a clinical report of 450 genes from that panel of 24,000 that will be turned around in 2 weeks. So a state-of-the-art clinical program with as well whole exome sequencing that will be available for research. And stay tuned, we're finally there, and Rich is going to basically execute on this in the coming months. As well, I think Roy and Ed are committed to step 3, which is further systematizing our biospecimen collection to enable research. Roy, as I mentioned, he's really championed the TTAR funds to support spores and other translation research. They're now moving into an application process for investigational led trials. And then as we accomplish all 4 of those tasks, monitor all this and figure out what else we can do to expand translation research. Healthcare has totally lagged behind in the IT space. If you look across industries, leveraging information technology has been something that has strongly related to productivity and where the healthcare industry has not been as successful. This is something where we have to do more of. And I think as well, we got to leverage this not only for clinical care, but for research, and as well think about how we bring to bear those people working in the AI space across the university. So one thing as well as part of our translational infrastructure is that Wade Schultz and Alan Chow have gotten now formal support from the hospital and the school to build a data lake information technology infrastructure such that all the clinical data, all the genomic data, all the biospecimen data are going to be put into a common system that is available for both clinicians and researchers to leverage. And with them all consented, we can actually really do some great work. We anticipate, what they tell me is that a beta test of this platform should be available in the latter part of 2020 with full launch in the latter part of 2021. We clearly need much better ability in the computational bioinformatics space. Mark Lemon is looking at that. We have new cores that we're now put into the Cancer Center in terms of functional genomics, precision cancer modeling, and moving into cancer metabolism. We are leveraging our industry partnerships. We are fostering entrepreneurship. I mentioned some of the companies there. And then as well, something that a lot of industries do that we don't do in healthcare, something called innovation trips, which is in certain industries, you're actually expected, in addition to taking some time off for vacation, to picking a trip where you're going to go somewhere where you've found out somebody's doing it better, differently, in a way that we're not, and your job is to go there for a few days, learn about it, and create value for the center. So a bunch of us have been talking about this. Excuse me. Believe it or not, that was my mother. You can run, but you can't hide. One thing we want to do is to support this. And stay tuned. This is something you want to build into it, where you'll apply, you'll tell us, I want to go to this center. They're doing something in clinical care research, something that we deem important. It's going to be, you need to prove that it'll create value for not only yourself, but the institution, and we want to support that trip. And that's something we want to take from other industries and now move it into what we do in healthcare. We want to support innovation in research, a lot of grant programs. I'm going to run out of time. This is the score we got in our grant, outstanding, and we are outstanding. But as you may know, it is not the highest score in NIH verbiage. The highest score, everybody know what it is? Exceptional. And I actually think we are exceptional. So our goal is, and I would say this is the theme of what we're going to do, is we are going to move from outstanding to exceptional. How do we do that? Well, I think part of it is to continue to focus on team science. And I'm going to cut to the chase because I'm running out of time. These programs are, I think, clearly been very successful. But how do we further expand team science? Is centers like this. This is just random examples that I wanted to offer up. But I think bringing together investigators towards a pivotal research focus is important. So Don Wen is going to, and Bob Groffel and others will be making this announcement. Our next series of pilot grants will be the Team Challenge Awards, Powering Innovation Through Team Science. What the application is going to be, and it's going to be up to $150,000 in funding, is put together a team where that team has to have a very discernible deliverable, program project grant, grant, and to make these sustainable teams such that that pivotal research focus is going to be really addressed by that multidisciplinary group. And I think this is going to be an exciting new funding area that we want to do in our cancer center. We want to always make sure that we engage diverse communities. Our catchment area, we have a lot of services across the hospital and the cancer center that do this. We are now, Kevin Vest and others, Melinda Irwin, are putting together the Center for Community Engagement and Health Equity, which really looks at all the features that we do in engaging communities. This is something we're just finalizing now and working out the funding mechanism for it. Education, no less importantly, and Harry Kluger has done, I think, a great job and want to further expand that. We want to also realize that beyond clinical operation budget, beyond our ability to get NIH support, we have to get philanthropy. These are some of the things we did in this year, but it's not enough. And I think we want to continue to expand development. We will be celebrating the 10th anniversary, so stay tuned. A lot of really exciting things that Kevin Vest and the committee are working on. And then lastly, as we think about the next decade, Lori Pickens and I and others are launching a strategic plan, which is starting this month. And you're going to hear more about that at a very high level across the entire enterprise. What should the next decade look like? And then lastly, as you've seen, and I can't even possibly fit in all an hour, we are doing amazing stuff at this cancer enterprise, at this cancer hospital and cancer center. And I want the world to know it. We don't want to be shy about it. And so Renee Gaudet and Dor have been charged with getting the word out. If you have something to share, tell us, because we want to tell the world about it. And in that respect, one aspect of our sort of public assessment of who we are is, whether we like it or not, is U.S. News and World Reports. This is what happened with the opening of Smilow. That doesn't make sense to me. We have done amazing work. If you look at where we were in 10 and where we are now, that trend makes no sense. The fact is that we haven't quite played the game. of how we report out these data, U.S. News reports. And the bottom line is we're not above this game. We got to play the game because we owe it to our patients to know that we care about what our ranking is. We've actually started to do that. Karen Adelson, working with the hospital, have committed to doing it. And as you may know, we're back on the list of 50 again. And in fact, if you actually look at the raw numbers, we were just a rounding error in terms of the mortality score that probably would have put us in the 20 range. But stay tuned. This is a 3-year rolling average, so I know this is going to go up. This is really important. And then I know I've run late, but bear with me if you could. I asked Andor to put together some of the press clips of what we've been doing, what we've been showing over the past several months, and I wanted to just share that with you. I guess I have to click on it, right?
Katie Crook, also here with us, Dr. Charles Fuchs. He is co-leader of this Stand Up to Cancer Dream Team.
You got to pay attention, or unexplained weight loss, or abdominal discomfort, or fatigue. But I think the one thing we have to be aware of is that when symptoms arise, oftentimes the cancer is too advanced. So yes, being keyed in, my wife was diagnosed at 44 because she noticed blood in her stool. So you got to pay attention to that.
E-cigarettes do not contain tobacco, but they are just as addictive as regular cigarettes because of their nicotine. We spoke with an oncologist with the Yale Cancer Center for insight.
Well, certainly I'd rather if someone has to smoke that they use this rather than a tobacco cigarette. But my goal is that no one uses anything. Let's not use anything that could cause harm to the lungs or to the heart or to the nervous system and the rest of the body.
Urologist Dr. Stan Honig, director of the Male Reproductive Health Program at Yale Cancer Center, answers the most common questions men ask about prostate cancer.
The American Urological Association recommends prostate cancer screening between the ages of 55 and 70. The problem with not screening is that if you don't screen at all, you may end up with more significant spread of disease where we may be able to catch it at a treatable form.
The American College of Physicians issued new breast cancer screening guidelines for average risk women under 50 years old with no symptoms for breast cancer. Radiologist Dr. Leanne Philpotts with Yale Cancer Center.
These new guidelines from the American College of Physicians have looked at other people's guidelines as well as the evidence that those guidelines are based on. Incidence of breast cancer increases with age. So the incidence isn't as high, and yet the chance of having a false positive on a mammogram in younger women is higher.
33 women have died with this type of cancer, 12 linked to the Allergan implants. Dr. Tomer Abraham is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon at Yale Cancer Center.
These are implants that are made with a textured material on the outside. And the reason that they're textured is because they're designed for scar tissue to grow into them so that they don't move around. And it appears to be that the way this scarring happens is through an inflammatory process, which increases the risk of this type of lymphoma.
July is Sarcoma Awareness Month, and for good reason. Dr. Harry Deshpande at Yale Cancer Center explains.
There are only 15,000 cases a year in the whole country. And you can imagine with numbers like that, many people don't even know it exists.
The sarcoma specialist says of those cases, there are more than 50 different types of the rare cancer.
Stony Creek Brewery in Brantford hosts both the registration and the post-ride parties for the Closer to Free ride every year. And this year, the owner's family members are riding for the very first time, and it's a very personal reason. Nearly $15 million has been raised since 2011 from this bike ride to support research and patient care at Smilow Cancer Hospital. Tonight, NBC Connecticut's Justin Shecker has the story behind Team Petals for June.
June's daughters cherish their mother's love for flowers.
My mom just planted hydrangeas everywhere. Hydrangeas made her so happy. It was just her signature flower.
That's why they've named their team for the Closer to Free ride, Petals for June.
A lot of what we learned is to go big, to try new things, to challenge ourselves, and this is a new challenge for us.
In September, they'll be riding in honor of their mom.
She's with us every day. There's no love like a mother's love.
To help make the world closer to cancer-free.
Danielle McCarthy is in the fight of her life.
I have reoccurring thyroid cancer.
She found out on Christmas Day. She's getting medical care from doctors and nurses at the Smilow Cancer Hospital at Yale, New Haven. And some TLC.
Thank you. People like you inspire us every single day.
From people like Maureen and Dana, who've become allies in her fight.
And she gave me this wonderful rock that just touched my heart.
Just over a year ago, Maureen started painting rocks with inspirational messages to give to patients. It started when her brother was a cancer patient here.
And I was looking for a way of connecting with other people here. And I started painting rocks and leaving them for people. And when I reached out that way, it was amazing.
Dana, who works at Smilow, saw Maureen's work and invited her to make more rocks for more patients. You can see with Danielle what a good idea that was.
She handed me this rock, and on the back, it says, "I like a girl."
Every day, Danielle clutches onto that rock-solid support.
It's never going to let go of me, that's for sure, because I'll fight to the end.
So I wanted to share that video. Because in the end, that last video, that's what it's all about. And I am privileged to work with champions of what we're trying to do in cancer care. This is the challenge in medicine in the 21st century. And it requires very special people to take on that challenge. So I have overextended my time, but there was a lot I wanted to share. And I want to thank everybody here for what you do in all aspects of the mission. We are doing great work. And even though I don't have any time to take any questions because I've run over, I'm always available. My door is always open. And we'll have additional forums to talk about it, to have town halls, some things we want to institute. But, frankly, you all deserve a round of applause because what you're doing in cancer care is amazing. And those patients are benefiting from your talent and your dedication. So thank you all.